do I mean by a story-shaped view of life? I don't have a story-shaped view of life. I have my view of life and it's shaped by the Bible. Well, hang on. Let's just point and poke at that a little bit. Well, first of all, this story-shaped view of life, you'd have to say is inarticulate, in the sense that I couldn't actually write it down. If I start to write down my view of my approach to life, I tend towards getting a philosophy or a theology or a doctrine. That's more something that I can articulate. But this story-shaped view of the world is something that's a lot more kind of gut, more default, more visceral. It would appear, Hopkins, that your gut feel was only indigestion. I think it's helpful, the early German philosophers that started talking about this, they talked about the Weltanschauung. Apologies for any German speaking people listening or here today, which translates as a kind of life and worldview. So they're saying that it's different to what you say, how you say you're living. Your world and life view is something that's much more default, that you live out in the tough times, in the times of your life when you're just not thinking. That's the storyline that you're living out, your world and life view. See, it's not what we state or believe to be true. It's the truth that we live out. It's the internal story that shapes how we live, the default internal story. I like this quote from Coleridge. Christianity is not a theory or a speculation, but a life. Not a philosophy of life, but a life and a living process. I think that starts to tap into a little bit of what I'm trying to highlight. It's your story-shaped view of life that actually gives and defines your response to things that you see around you. It's what makes some things look familiar and what makes some things look really strange. When you see somebody doing something or reacting in some particular way to a thing in their world, it's your worldview, your story and life view of things that will shape whether you think that's crazy, strange, or whether you actually go, yeah, you resonate with it and go, that's right, that's a good approach. Another kind of metaphor to use is the notion of a heart, and Scripture uses this quite a lot as well. The notion of a heart being where you have your direction from. Your heart defines how you see things at a kind of real deep down internal level. Like last year, Archbishop Jensen in Sydney asked the question, where are our hearts fixed? He said, are the gods of this world so beguiling to us that we have become worldly Christians, slaves of fashion and gadgetry and possessions, indistinguishable from our neighbours in the houses we own, the holidays we take and the bling we acquire? Where are our hearts fixed? That's what he's referring to there when using the metaphor idea of the heart, and Scripture uses it too. Some other metaphors, we can talk about hinges. So we can talk about our internal hinges. I like this from Alpheus. He says, your story-shaped view of life is like a set of hinges on which all our everyday thinking and doing turns. I like that. And if any of you have tried to hang a door with its hinges, if the hinges aren't quite in line with each other either, the door actually won't turn, just to add to that imagery. Another metaphor often talked about, and you may have heard of, I want to look at this thing with my biblical glasses on. I've got a biblical view of the world because of my Bible-shaped glasses, if you like. Well, take that one step further. Have anyone been to a 3D movie of recent? I went to this one a little while ago, and I've got these glasses. I mean, I could talk at length about and critique that film, which I won't do today. Avatar was the film. but I hadn't been to a 3D movie since Jaws 3 back in the 80s. Jaws 3 was just ridiculous, so I didn't bother. But I went and saw Avatar and they gave me these fancy glasses. And I did what everyone does. I sat there and I lifted them up and saw the difference. And I must say I was staggered by the difference. I mean, it's this blurry mess. But as soon as you put your glasses on, everything it becomes clear. You see more clearly. You see in a very different way. So in a sense, your worldview, your story-shaped view of life is like a set of glasses in which you see and view the world. Does that metaphor help? And Francis Schaeffer said this as well about worldviews, that everyone has one. You can't say, no, I don't have one of those things that he's talking about. But no, all people have a story-shaped view of life. He actually said worldview. And nobody, whether ditch digger or professional thinker, can live without one. You can't actually get up in the morning out of bed without a worldview, a way of seeing the world, life and others. Well, it's helpful in determining what a worldview is to also look at what it isn't. So let's just do that for a second. It's not actually a life perspective or a set of principles and ideals or even a system of values. You see, but you can write those things down. We're talking about something that's much more gut than that. So it's not those things. It isn't a philosophy or a theology. Again, you can articulate those things. There are other factors, though, that come into play, and you might be thinking, what about ... Well, let's just do a little bit of an activity. I want you to tell me if you see, when I put this next picture up, whether it's a duck or a rabbit. Actually, I'm going to put a picture up. I want you to tell me whether it's a rabbit or a duck. Okay? Hands up for duck. Who saw a duck first? Okay. Who saw a rabbit first? Reasonably even. All right. So your perception of things, that actually has a factor to play here, but let me show you another picture. Is this cup half empty or half full? No, I don't mean this cup actually. I mean in general, are you a person who tends to see things as half empty or half full? Sort of pessimist or optimist type thing. So hands up, half full. Yep, okay. Hands up, half empty. That's me, by the way. Interestingly, I do this lots with teachers, and majority of the room is usually hands up for half full. I think teachers tend to be quite optimistic. That's just as an aside. So your character disposition, how God's made you to be, will play a role here. Will be part of the way you process and see your view of things. Yes. Let me show you another picture. I wonder if you can be thinking about which picture here best describes how you feel today. Don't tell me, I don't want to know. In fact, we could pick multiple pictures from there, couldn't we? Because you can have multiple emotions happening all at the one time. You could be very sad and in grief about a certain thing in your life at the moment, but you could also be really happy at the same time. So your emotions in any one day also come into play. But what I want to suggest to you, that these other factors, these perception issues, the character dispositions that God has given you, whether you're sanguine or phlegmatic or whatever the other, melancholic, or whether you're a Myers-Briggs IMFJ 1426 or whatever those things are I never remember, or just your emotions or your tiredness level on a day. Now those things come into play, sure, but you need to realise that they exert an influence via your internal story. Your internal story is still the anchor point in which you unfold your understanding of things, the way you view the world. All right, so if that's the case, how are these internal stories, these worldviews, if you like, how are they actually formed? Well, of course, they're formed. Remember the cartoon we started with? They're formed by being immersed into the patterns of living and language that you grow up in. Of course, that's an obvious one, isn't it? To expand on that, it's the way that things are kind of talked about in our family and our society. It's the cultural storytelling in the culture and society that we grow up in, that we live in. But of course, it's also shaped by your own personal experience, the particular journey that each of us have come to arrive at this point will have a shaping influence on our worldview.